Welcome back to another episode of Friends from Work, a podcast about all things in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, hosted by me, Robbie Earl, and my longtime friend from work and co-host, Kyle Sconewell.
Welcome. The hype up that happens right before we start the recording makes my day. Here we go.
Okay. Oh, it's a whole process. It's like a 2 hour. Just I'm getting ramped up, finding the right tunes in the shower and everything. There's a lot of preparation that goes into this. Have you ever seen Have you seen Die Hard 2?
Yes, but it's been a long time.
Actually, the villain in Die Hard 2 is the president in Iron Man 3.
Oh, yeah.
But he always, that movie starts with this super weird ritual that's just introducing the villain as a real freak of a guy. And that's me every time I'm getting ready to podcast. It's just that's the amount of focus and dedication I bring. I don't know what you're doing over there, Kyle, but...
I was waiting for you to log on for 30 minutes.
Yeah,
so that's what I was doing.
My nemesis, 21st century technology.
You would not do well against Kang.
That's true. I wouldn't do well against Victor Timely.
That's true.
Now I'm thinking about so I started this Die Hard 2 story because I always picture this as just a really weird kind of a psych yourself up routine, but I didn't even describe what the psyching up is because I realized as I was saying it that it's too weird, and now I don't want people to think that that's actually what I do in preparation for the podcast. But now I think by drawing attention to it, everyone's just going to go look and see what that is and assume that I do in fact do that routine prior to the podcast. So I'm just going to transition to what we're discussing today.
It's your classic lose.
Right. Which is Loki Season 2, Episode 5. And...
oh, gosh.
You and I have not... I think we exchanged 3 texts about this episode. Mm-hmm. I think we're roughly on the same page. But holy cow.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the best episodes of television that has come out on Disney+, period.
I'm ready to come in guns a-blazing here, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Some hot takes here. I think I'm fully in on Benson and Moorhead getting whatever leeway they want at this point. I thought it was so good last night.
Mm-hmm.
Glued. Could not look away. I don't know how well that translates to film, but I would be fine for them to be in contention for some big movies as well. But if they want to do Daredevil, right, I think they've proven they can do this vibe very well. Maybe it's a little too sci-fi trippy for Daredevil, but I'm all in on what they're doing. I just thought the emotional moments finally really hit for me to see some connectivity and consequences. I actually thought visually it looked stunning. The loom looks so cool. The spaghettification, whatever you call that.
Right.
The spaghetti stuff looked amazing to me. Obviously.
And very Infinity War reminiscent.
Obviously very Infinity War, which is literally what I was going to say. Just artfully done. The music was masterful. I bought the performances. I loved everything about it. And I like, so far, Loki Season 2 more than Loki Season 1. But obviously the finale from Loki Season 1 is one of the greatest things they've ever done. And I don't know how they're going to land this one. But as long as this is not a total plane crash, I like Loki Season 2 more than Loki Season 1. I'm just more invested now for whatever reason.
No, I think that there are a lot of levels there. I'm more invested. The stuff that we've kind of raised in prior episodes about it leaning into things that Loki can bring to this show that not any other character could. Instead of it just kind of being Loki is almost like the straight man and everything around him is crazy. Now it's we're seeing through the entire series stuff that's more and more rooted in what he, his own experience and his power set and his worldview. And then, I think that just on a technical level, it consistently looks even better.
Yes,
I feel
it does.
like the writing is more consistent. The performances are more consistent.
Remember
It's
we
just
talked
like
about also the sets and the cinematography? Did you notice how
Yeah.
cool it was? The first shot of the show is Loki waking up, realizing that everyone else is gone, but not him. But how cool was it to see him just walk through those aisles and like go
Right.
down the hallways and actually have a tangible set? That's the kind of stuff
Right.
that has grown from season 1, and I love it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think
Like we got
the
to
story
see
choices
some of the rooms behind the doors. You know, like you actually get to
Right,
see like where
right.
he is going physically.
yeah, I feel like they are expanding on everything that I wanted from season 1, and I just look back. There are moments in the first season of Loki that are just not my favorite, like things that I've brought up even in episodes that a lot of people enjoy. I have some little nits, and like whether that's like Loki season 2, whenever I talked about not loving the way like Sylvie taking control of the different Roxcart employees and stuff is executed, or like
Season 1.
stuff in Loki season 5, like or sorry, episode 5.
Yeah, I got you.
Am I saying season
You
every
said
time?
season every time, but I get it.
Loki season 1, episode 5,
Right.
where we talked about kind of some of the like over the top goofiness, over the top for me.
Yep.
I think that's another one that a lot of people disagree with. But regardless, like those are things that even whenever I was like fully in, and you and I were pretty stoked on Loki season 1 at the time,
Still
even
am.
then there were things where I was like, like this isn't perfect.
Totally agree.
Which is, again, that's a really high bar, obviously. But this season, for the most part, but especially last night, there was not a single moment in last night's episode that I was not 100% in for.
Wholeheartedly agree. Totally agree. I think it's that Benson and Moorhead Moon Knight edge that they brought to an already developed product. And what you're getting, in my opinion, is now this falls in like the Severance silo feel of a little bit of creepiness or just weirdness, and things aren't unsettled and not right. But I don't know, the pacing, some of the shots I've talked about, it does feel to me an elevated level. I also just got to talk about one of the things I think was missing a little bit from season 1, and maybe a little bit up until this point, was that emotional core. Like the entire time I'm watching WandaVision, it's really because in my heart, I feel so sad for Wanda. Like everything about it feels sad, and she doesn't have a place, and what does she have left? And so all those moments really hit for me, especially the grief conversation later in that season, etc. But I think in the first season of Loki, I'm a little bit predisposed to just being like, what? Because I already kind of liked the Loki we knew. We've talked about this a million times, right? And I liked the Infinity Stones and the Infinity Saga. So to kind of belittle those was a little bit weird. And then have me buy into this, oh, people are dying kind of thing was confusing. And I think even a little bit in season 2, when we don't know some of the stakes, and we talked about some of those moments at the end of a couple of these episodes where it's like B12 is crying, and I'm kind of like, what are we crying about? I'm missing this a little bit. I just thought to bring it home, like in all this multiverse talk and all of this like pruning branches talk and millions and billions of lives that are going to be gone, to actually bring it home to that conversation with Loki and Sylvie. And maybe it's because I've had a weird week. I've had a really weird week emotionally. I was watching that with Annika last night, and it just really got me when Sylvie was like calmly being like, no, that's not why you want to do it. That's not why you want to do it. And then he gets to the point where he said, I just want to be with my friends, and I just don't want to be alone. And then she's like, well, then you got to go write your own story. And then it zooms out a little bit, and he kind of says, but if they all have their place, like, what's my place? And that really got me, because I was like, I've come so far with this character now, he doesn't really have a place. Like if the TVA doesn't exist, this is a variant who was pulled out of his timeline. He doesn't have the relationship anymore with his brother, his family, his friends, if they go back to what they're, I don't know. That moment really worked. So again, in all this crazy talking about millions and billions of lives, it's hard for me to connect. But when you talk about Loki's life, that's when it got me really emotional.
Well, and to your point, when you make it personal, not even just to the protagonist, but in general, like the record store scene,
Yes.
where we see this character that's the first scene we ever get with that character, but they do a great job of kind of immediately, like there's a good connection between him and Sylvie. Mm-hmm. You kind of care about him because you can feel that Sylvie, who we care about, cares about him. And it's just like a well-imagined scene in general. Mm-hmm. So that whenever you start to have the effects show up there, like even that feels really tangible and like emotional in a way where like whenever we're just watching the branches on a screen be clipped, it's like and you know, I think maybe that's the point, is we understood like in the abstract what was happening, but we didn't really understand why we cared.
We didn't feel it.
Now we understand why we care. Right.
We knew it in our head. We didn't feel it in our heart. You know, I saw a couple people on Discord, just really briefly. I haven't spent a lot of time on there yet, but a couple people were saying like, really good for a filler episode. And I don't know if that became the thing online, that this was a filler episode. I don't know that I've ever had a take that I disagree more with than that, if that's how people are viewing it. Like, to me, if Lamentis is a filler episode, this is doing so much more work in everything we just said, in actually bringing it and landing the plane for an actual person versus just the lines on the screen. So like it brought it home. So like I think without knowing some of their background and without feeling the tangible effects of what these people's lives are supposed to be, and then have that get ruined, that's not filler. Like that is the core of the entire show. Like the entire show has been trying to say, we have to have this TVA, otherwise these people will lose their lives. But we haven't felt that because we haven't seen it. Well, now we actually saw it. That doesn't make it filler. Now we get to feel it.
No. Two thoughts on that. One of the things that I like, my favorite things about the podcast is me saying something that I don't want to happen and then it happening and me loving it. Like, because that's such a delightful surprise. And I think I said something last week about like, you know what I don't want? Like a whole thing of Loki having to go around and collect everybody. And like, it just feels like it's going to be sort of a side thing. And then we come back but because of the way it was executed, because it was played generally more as a heartfelt thing than as a comedy, like we did have funny moments, but I like that it wasn't just like constant, like, what, Asgard? That's crazy. It's like,
it was almost none of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the funny stuff was with him and OB, and even that, and a little bit with Mobius, but all of it was kind of like tinged with the, like a real like emotional weight. So I get maybe why people would say that looking at it on paper, but I'm with you. I totally disagree. And the other thing there is,
I also think the decision to have Sylvie not come with them, which then ruined the let's get everyone together thing. So then the episode kind of shifted in tone, because now it was Loki just accepting like, this isn't going to work. This is not how I thought it was. So I think that was a clutch decision, because now it took the focus away from just getting everyone back. But then only to have her see the effects of the opposite side of it and then have her come back. So I thought, you're right. The execution didn't make it just feel like we got to get everyone back. I don't know.
Right.
We got to go back. Well, lost.
I also think that, and maybe this is as much a symptom of the Disney Plus style of kind of series that they've been embracing so far, that apparently they're kind of rethinking. But because, you know, when you have 6 episodes, I get that people feel like they want something that's moving in the same direction at the same speed for 6 episodes, so that there's not this feeling that can occur in these shows where you get to episode 6 and it's like, wait, why is this so rushed when it felt like we had all this time to kill at the beginning of the
Right.
season. So I get where people are coming from, but I also think that is like I'm getting a little over the idea of even having of thinking of something as a filler episode, even if it is something that kind of veers off the main driving story, because I don't think that we should look at these series as just like purely
Get to
plot vehicles.
Point A to point B, and that's all. Yeah.
Yeah, especially because I think what people get frustrated about is it's like, what is this doing to move the MCU forward? And it's like,
are you actually enjoying it sitting there? Are you watching a piece of art or not?
Right. Like, are you, because if you don't care about the characters, like it feels like sometimes people want like just a piece of notebook paper that's like, these are the things that happen from here to here, and now like the balls move forward, and then like now we're set up for the next Doctor Strange movie or whatever. And I say that to say, like, this is the perfect example of an episode that, like, yeah, you probably could have cut this stuff out from a plot perspective and just had some realization where Loki understands the time slipping, or like there's some other quicker way where he knows he can do it intentionally. Like, I could imagine, if you were short on time, ways that they could have pulled that off. But why? Like,
it would have been less fulfilling.
Oh yeah, and I think that it would have left us all like feeling like none of it was worth it, or it wasn't as worth it. Like, because it makes everything we've seen, like you said, actually have impact retroactively. And I think like it introduces some really interesting elements in a way that gives those elements weight moving forward. Like, instead of it just being like, and now this is the thing, and this is the new status quo. It's like, I'm intrigued because of the way this stuff has been rolled out.
Weirdly, I think the length is just a project by project thing a little bit, because anytime you call something filler, like I think about Daredevil season 2, when you make something 13 episodes that are over an hour long, so over 13 hours of content, that is so long that you almost need to do like a mid-season pivot in the plot. Like, you have to take such a large bite out of what you're covering, because you have so much time to quote unquote fill. And so even in that, I think that there are 4 episodes of the 13, I've said this before, where you're kind of like, what are we doing? Like, what was the point of getting there? Like, so there's filler in the long stuff too. But then I've also had the opposite sometimes, like with Secret Invasion, where I felt like you're trying to tell a story that requires like 10 hours and you're only giving me 5. And therefore certain things get sped up at the end and whatnot, and it feels a little bit off. So it's really just a project by project thing. And with this season of Loki, I think because, yes, they're dealing with theoretically like a huge concept, all of existence ending and all this stuff, but they're focusing it so much on just those 6 characters, a group of people from a small location in the TVA, not the entire TVA. Like we talked about, we want to see a little more of the scale, but because they're not doing the scale, and because really they haven't been talking a ton about like Kang invading or something like that, it really is about keeping the TVA running and stopping this loom from blowing up. They've actually kept this really, really large picture story really tight and small. And then I think therefore the whole thing doesn't feel bloated or rushed, right? It doesn't feel either. It just feels like this is the correct pace. 6 hours for me is feeling like enough to tell the story they're telling here. But Secret Invasion, no, right? That's the difference.
No, I thought of Secret Invasion too, because I think that is one where if you looked at what happens on paper, I think it always kind of made sense to me, but I think that it was the way it was paced, and it was just like the level of investment people didn't have.
It's a multi-year thing to get people invested there. But this really, we kind of have investment with the characters, and we just want to know what's actually happening with the TVA, the actual physical location.
I think kind of moving into plot questions here, just final thoughts for me qualitatively. I had the exact same thought you did as to Benson and Moorhead. Like, I think this is we've had that kind of conversation over the last few years. Like, who do we think has the chops to kind of step into the shoes of the Russos.
Out of nowhere, off the top rope, Benson and Moorhead.
Man, so I think, and it's this team specifically, and I think my new wish is that, because I know there have been the different conversations about whether Waldron's in or out for Secret Wars. I would love it if Martin just gets added to that writing team also, because I'm now like looking back and realizing, I mean, my favorite bit of Waldron writing to date has been the Loki season 1 finale, which Martin, now I was reading that interview that dropped last week after episode 4, and apparently Waldron kind of had to dip early to get started on Multiverse of Madness.
Interesting.
And kind of handed the finale to Martin to finish, which I'm not saying Waldron shouldn't get credit for that, because he was the creator of the series and obviously I think gets a lot of credit. But clearly, like, they have a special something working together.
Good point.
And then, yeah, like the directing style where I'm like, yeah, this is like, especially if we're looking at a multiverse saga finale, like that feels like the right team. Like it feels like they understand the balance. And in the same way that, like, because I think that that's part of what made Infinity War and Endgame work so well is it needed like that kind of like Captain America undertone that the Russos brought. Obviously, there's so much other stuff going on
in
Infinity War and Endgame that's like space and not Captain America subject matter wise. But it kind of gives you that classic, like the underdogs like fighting against all odds thing that is sort of rooted in that perspective. And so I think it worked so well to finish out that arc and to kind of reflect on the Infinity Saga. And I feel like that team, or just like either piece of that, the writing or the directing, like I feel like they've got that, but in this
with the other undertone of a little bit more mysterious and sci-fi and what's going on kind of thing.
Right.
Whereas the Russos are a little more grounded by nature. Look, Moon Knight for me, I said this in the last rewatch, is my second favorite Disney Plus show now over Loki season 1. And my only real critique of Moon Knight, it's probably not going to pass WandaVision ever just because of the characters Wanda and Vision and what they're about. But my only real critique of Moon Knight is that the visual effects got a little bit wonky at times, and I wish they had honed that in. But on a rewatch for me, like the cinematography, the acting, it's really, really hard to put your finger on what a director is technically doing all the time, I think, because there's so many people involved. All I can say is I watched Loki season 2, and it just feels overall elevated a little bit. Like if Loki season 1 and Hawkeye and Secret Invasion, all those directors were good. But let's say, this is mean, but like they were all like B directors. And it's like they handled a good story well. This feels like they're handling a good story excellent. Like this feels like the upper echelon. Right. This is like how I feel when I watch Severance and Ben Stiller. So
well, and to your point, like about the excellence there, we talked before we ever even saw Loki season 2 about how it was famously the only Marvel project ever that needed 0 reshoots, and how
it feels like it. It feels good.
Yeah, well, it's like they had nothing has felt like it's attached with a rivet gun. Like it's all. It feels like
nothing was shoehorned in. No plot point has been wasted.
Exactly what Martin said early on. Like, or I think maybe this was Kevin Wright, but when they were asked about, how did you need to change things with the Jonathan Majors stuff and like what's all changed since the decision was first made to do a Loki season 2. And I think now from several different creators, we've heard like nothing. Like we always do exactly what we wanted to do. And we did that. And,
right. And like, even some of the plot points, like in season 1, they set up that awesome finale of the second episode, I think it is, which is, oh my gosh, Sylvie's bombing the entire timeline. And then that really kind of ends up feeling like a little bit of a letdown / shoehorn. Like her whole multi-year plan was just to get back to the TVA and basically distract them for a second. And that's fine, but it feels like that was a little bit kind of like misleading or shoehorned in a little bit. I don't feel that here at all. I don't feel any of those points being dropped. Plot points.
And it even where, because I'm sure someone would say, well, but that does kind of result in her, like her killing He Who Remains is the end goal of that. But it doesn't, I think that's the problem with that season at times, is it all makes sense, but it just feels like it, those little like twists and turns aren't all satisfying enough to be justified. Like, it's like, okay, I get what you're saying, and the people that would defend, like, and again, I'm much higher on like Lamentus than you are, but I think that like that's ultimately the question is, does it feel like it's all like, if you are going to take some time to like loop things back in, like, is it going to feel like we invested that time wisely or poorly? But I think
this is where I always got to take a quick second to remind all of our audience at home, Greg mainly here, because he loves Loki season 1, that I love all things in the MCU, and I love Loki season 1. It is currently my number 3. After this, it will fall to my number 4. I really, really enjoy it. Okay, so just because I'm critiquing a few things doesn't mean, you know.
Well, that's it. I mean, that's an interesting question, though, whether we're going to average out season 1 and season 2s, or if we're going to rank them differently.
Like I said, unless the finale totally bombs, this has been more enjoyable for me throughout than the first one, for sure.
And I guess talking about kind of the pacing and the number of these mini arcs within the arc of a season, what I'm really loving now about Loki season 2 is it feels like it is directly addressing some of the issues that other Disney Plus series, or at least Marvel Disney Plus series, have had in terms of like the build up and letdowns at certain levels that maybe like where it doesn't feel like it has that intentionality like this one does.
We're getting
and specifically
there, right?
What I'm talking about, is
they're improving,
right? Well, and like the episode 4 in retrospect, to me, that feels like your average Disney Plus finale, right? Like, there's a lot going on. You have like all the characters kind of coming together. Like, I was reading through Greg's recap, and it's like, wow, like there are a lot of cuts and like different things. And you could see, and then I saw that a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but I was just kind of surprised that I saw some negative reviews of Loki episode 4. And people talking about it kind of being this like anticlimactic thing, and that I think people were almost reading it as a finale. But I love that in the same way, like we were talking to Natalie Holt about this, more on that. But also I saw in the interview with Eric Martin, like talking about how episodes 5 and 6 are really like the meat of this second season. I love that. Like, I love this, like we kind of got a lot of the like the finale-ish kind of feeling stuff dealt with in that episode 4 in a way that reminds me a little bit of episode 4 of Moon Knight, in that like a lot of stuff's coming together in a way that I love. It's a standout episode. Like, I came in after episode 4 last week saying like I was over the moon. So that's not a diss at all. It's just, I really like the structure of that story-wise.
Absolutely.
Because now I'm like, I have no idea what the beats are going to be.
You know, it's funny.
And that's really refreshing.
What's funny for me, just in terms of emotional investment, I talked about this last week. Last week, for whatever reason, the first half of episode 4, I just found myself not as connected. And then obviously it escalated like crazy to a massive mind-blowing ending. But for whatever reason, from the jump, I was locked into this one. So I'm with you. Speaking of that, so you just heard from Robbie, we got a chance to talk to Natalie Holt. That interview was really fun. I think it's only like 15 minutes long, 16 minutes long. It will be at the end of this episode. So if you thought the music was as cool as I did, and in general you think it's as cool here in Loki as it's ever been, you're going to want to hear what she has to say. She does hint at some fun things coming in the finale. So be sure to stick all the way through this episode to hear that interview. I also want to say I'm really close to finishing my screen recap for the Marvels. What's weird is, just as an announcement, like next week, before the Loki finale, you will have a Marvels episode first, technically, because we're going to have that episode out on Thursday night, and we will just be watching the finale then. I know it's so weird they do this timing-wise. Why couldn't the Marvels be next week? But I know a lot of our listeners are already discussing, like, am I watching the Marvels first and then coming home to the Loki finale? Am I doing the Loki finale and Marvels afterward? It's like Oppenheimer Barbie all over again.
Right.
But I have a screen recap that will get your mind right for that. That'll be out this weekend or on Monday, so you have a week to kind of process that on YouTube. And then, like I said, Marvel's episode on Thursday night, initial reactions, and then the Loki finale, hopefully ready by Friday afternoon. And then on Friday as well, you and I are talking to John Pizzino. So basically, what I'm thinking is we're going to shift a little bit to the Marvels next week, and then we're going to shift our brain to the Loki finale and the fallout from that. And then after that, with Thanksgiving, Christmas stuff, I'm really looking forward to spending a little more time on Spider-Man and talking to John Pizzino and his work there, maybe picking up some steam on our rewatch through Phase 4.
Yeah.
So just kind of three phases here before Christmas. And then you know how that goes, right? Then we have the friendlies, our patrons getting artwork and voting on the friendlies, and kind of starts the whole year over. Season 5. So yeah, anyways.
And I'm hearing, and I don't know anything here, so this is not any kind of spoiler, but in conversations with Greg, there's some kind of buzz about some crazy stuff going on between the Loki finale and the Marvels. I don't think that they're connected, but apparently there's some kind of 1-2 punch that's being rumored. So all I'm saying is it's making me lean in a little bit more, which even if it's not justified is always kind of a fun feeling. So if other people are, because it's been a strange thing with the Marvels, right? Like with the strike going on, there's been very little promo. It's just like, this is the date shifted a bit, and I feel like it's kind of snuck up on a lot of folks,
Good point.
Me included. So I don't know, just in the last week or two, my anticipation for that is really starting to build for the movie itself. Like, I'm really excited about the creators that are involved, but also I just, it is kind of like we're in the multiverse saga now. Like, it's a little strange because the last film we had was Guardians, which was great, but was not really connected. And I think that, but Quantumania definitely was. And I think that it would make more sense to now be viewing new projects through the Quantumania lens of like, we're moving things forward than the Guardians.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm excited to see what that looks like in conjunction with the Loki finale.
All right. So we're going to take a quick break and hear from some of our sponsors, but then we're going to come back with some just big questions. I wrote some giant question marks on a few things here regarding this episode of Loki, and then Natalie Holt. So we'll be right back.
And if you enjoy Friends from Work, you might also enjoy Friends from Work Plus, which is our paid subscription service available on Substack and also Patreon, where we offer all kinds of things. This week, we are starting a new chapter of our Saturday morning cartoons watch through. And so we're about to head into X-Men the Animated Series Season 3 this coming weekend. If you're listening the day this drops, we're going to be watching the 90s Spider-Man X-Men crossover. And I'm excited about that and just kind of the coming weeks there as we get closer to the X-Men 97 premiere. A lot of other stuff going on, and we'll talk more about that as we get further into the year. But we would invite you to check that out if you're curious, and we'd love to see you there.
All right, so about halfway through this episode, one of my notes says, all of existence is in danger. And I wrote, from what? Like, I was getting so frustrated that we've heard that so many times that we just have not seen a practical ramification of what that means. Mm-hmm. Then, the back half of this episode, we started seeing what that could look like to see these branches start getting destroyed and the spaghetti nature of it. But my biggest question still is, why is that happening? Like, what is actually happening there? The TVA is melting down, and then as it melts down, it prunes other timelines? That's all the timelines exploding? that has nothing to do with Kang, correct? Or He Who Remains? Was this part of He Who Remains' plan in the first place? Like, I now see the ramifications of a pruned branch, and it sucks for the people out there. But why?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Here's what's confusing to me, which is not a good answer to your question, I guess. But I thought that the stakes early on in the season were, we have to prune all these branches because otherwise the loom will melt down and like it'll be multiversal chaos. And so that's why you had like General Dox and that kind of rogue crew trying to take out all the branches themselves. But I'm confused. Like, some branches were taken out, and that was like that tragic moment that we've talked about. And it seems like what we were just seeing again was like that made more tangible, and seeing the actual timelines kind of disappear, which, by the way, that the end of that Sylvie scene where she's just surrounded by like the dark threads was like bone chilling.
It looked awesome.
But I'm like, okay, yeah, I don't understand now. If that was what we were trying to, if we were pruning branches to try to avoid like the consequences of the loom melting down, or however we want to talk about it, then now that it has melted down, why are those consequences just that the branches are being pruned? Like, does that make sense? Like, if that's what we were trying to do to stave off the bad thing, then why is the bad thing just resulting in the thing that we were doing to try to stave it off?
Does any of this have to do with incursions, you think? Or are they not even going to say that word in this series?
I wouldn't be surprised if we get something there in the next episode. I mean, one thing that I was thinking prior to even watching episode 5, I would love if we get something that's more akin to the finale, just in terms the season 1 finale, in terms of the exposition. Like, I know people talk about exposition dumps as a bad thing, but I'm like, I
need it.
Put it in reverse. I'm here for it. Like, I need all of the exposition that you're going to give me. Like, I would love to see how this is all linking. I feel like the one gripe I have potentially with the MCU's incursion thing so far is that it just doesn't feel clearly defined. Like, in the comics, the Hickman comics that really introduced this concept, like the second issue, he lays out, this is how this works. Like, this is the problem. This is like going to be the structure around which like, or within which everything else in this run happens. And there's a ton in that's confusing, but like the basic structure and the stakes are very clear.
It's like Inception. Like, Inception is very confusing, but they do a quick 20-minute section where they're asking questions like, well, what about this? Well, what about this? And then literally they just kind of explain it. Well, then this and this and this and this, and here's what happens if this. And it's like, okay, well, thank you. Now we know, like, you set up the rest of the movie. Okay, now we know the rules. I still don't know the rules, and maybe it won't be the show. I'm not knocking the show for that. But,
no.
But some film has to come along and center the entire MCU at some point. And someone's going to have to do it.
I again, it's not like casting blame is like worthwhile anyway, but that's not what I'm doing. But I do feel like Waldron, he introduced the whole kind of multiverse concept really here in the first season of Loki.
And then left.
But then Multiverse of Madness, I almost feel like we, he talks about, and we've brought that up on the podcast before, he jokes about like creating the mess in Loki and then having to clean it up in Multiverse of Madness. I actually think he created more of a mess in Multiverse of Madness whenever it's the, like, as to the incursions, because we kind of get an explanation from Reed Richards in that they seem to imply that incursions are caused by entities
spending too much time
from one reality going to another.
Yeah, and spending too much time in the new one. which is
Right.
kind of what
And
the TVA does, kind of.
Yeah. I mean, you could see how that could link in with like the red line like concept within the TVA.
Right.
But it's just, and I'm always fine with the MCU changing this stuff up. And I think the reason that that's happening and the reason it's tied to an individual like that is probably to allow for the Kang of it all, which is not really a component as much in Hickman's like his version of this saga. So I think that like I could see where it would now make sense that certain Kangs traveling, like that is what would cause these issues. In the comics, the incursions are such like a force of nature. Like it's almost like it's like a hurricane or something.
Right, but maybe they're saving that for Kang Dynasty. Like maybe that's where they explain it, and then Secret Wars is the ramifications. But I'm with you. I'm in desperate need of a little more lead up before that, if that's the case. That's part of the nature of making a quote unquote multiverse saga, and then also having films scheduled and shows that really don't have anything to do with it, right? Like you had Hawkeye scheduled to be made, even though it had nothing to do with the multiverse saga. You could argue that a little bit in the Infinity Saga, that like Guardians 2 had nothing to do with the Infinity Saga. And there are probably a few films like that, but I'm just kind of looking at this going like, we're setting this up and then we're about to go into Echo and Daredevil and Captain America, all films that ostensibly don't have anything to do with, it seems, this stuff. So you're kind of like trying to have your cake and eat it too, basically, doing all these things. But that kind of did lead to my other question, which is, do we have an answer on why is Loki special? Why is Loki different? Right? Like everybody else gets sent back to their timeline, Loki doesn't. Everybody else turns into spaghetti, even Sylvie, who is a Loki variant, but Loki doesn't. Loki still can time skip, and now we're seeing that's an ability. Where did that even come from in the first place? It happened when he got kicked out of the time portal from He Who Remains as Citadel. That's the first time we saw it happen. But why?
Right.
Like, I just kept thinking, why is he different? It's not taking my enjoyment away from the show, but I'm just, as a fan, asking, like, why do we think he's different?
And surely that's going to be explained. My answer from the kind of comics perspective, and I sort of saw hints of this earlier in this season, but it seems like they're making explicit this idea that Loki is the god of stories, which is this kind of Al Ewing era invention where it's like he took Loki and made the character into a like dimension hopping, like super kind of meta, the ability to get outside of like the entire created order within Marvel. And it's like very trippy, and it's not like fourth wall, like Deadpool style, but it's like this ability to look at the story from outside of it and inject yourself at points and then step out again. And I think that that's what's starting to happen here. I think there, because it's comics, you don't necessarily have to, like, you can kind of do things and people buy it without having to go through like the actual kind of nitty gritty explanation. I feel like that explanation is needed more in this context. So I don't think that they're just going to be like, oh, well, you know, Loki's Loki. I feel like they're going to tie it to something that happened with.
It sure feels like he's going to be permanently tied to the TVA, or like this is his new role in the MCU, that he will be removed from all of the rest of the saga, basically.
And it does, like, it makes Loki feel. I thought about this while I was watching it, and maybe again, this is me reading this in, but did you think of the line from Ragnarok?
Oh, no. Go ahead, and then I'll say mine.
I kept thinking of the line where Thor goes, Loki, you'll always be the god of mischief, but you could be so much more.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And I love that this is kind of the realization of that. Like, because I talked about how I felt like Loki, it's almost doing this like retroactive work where like it's acknowledging that Loki post Dark World was a little like there wasn't as much to do with the character. Like once you kind of take the teeth out of him, And I think now is evolving that character in a way that I'm really excited about, where now I'm like, yeah, I like that. Like, there's this thing that happens sometimes in franchises like this where a former villain becomes like, he kind of becomes an ally and then becomes toothless and then starts to seem like way less powerful than he used to be. And eventually it's just like, oh man, like I kind of missed this, like back whenever I was sort of afraid of that guy. And I like that instead of just like going and fading away, I really don't know what's going on with Loki and like where he's heading, but he feels significant now to the story.
Agreed. I just like that they removed him from the other version of Loki that we know, in that, like, I was watching this episode thinking, I don't really have any desire to ever see a world where Loki is back in like Asgardian outfits, like using his magic powers to be mischievous again and fighting like with the Avengers. I was thinking like, this is a perfect role for him to never maybe go back to that, but to be like, do I want to see him interact with Thor? That'd be really cool. But in this way, like, you have no idea what I've experienced and blah, blah, blah. And I'm now like this time guy basically, but not just like a grounded person anymore. And I'm okay with that.
Well, because that's when they were at their best, I thought, is when Loki's always kind of a step ahead of Thor, not just in that he's like outfoxing him, but that like Loki is supposed to be the smarter of the two, like the one that's kind of like Thor is a little bit more naive. He's like obviously stronger, but like Loki is the really savvy one. And yeah, I like this idea of a relationship where Loki is just like on this whole other level in terms of his like understanding, and seeing Thor wrestle with that. Because again, I feel like that dynamic had been flipped a bit by the end of Ragnarok, where it really did feel like Thor was the Thor was the one that was having to like explain things to Loki. And it's like, I don't really love that dynamic. So yeah, I think now look, I'm always going to be down to see Loki like don the Asgardian armor again.
Well,
I'm a costume guy.
Yeah, now I'm thinking about it, if I should have said that, but I think I like it removed. Here's my final thing, because we got to get to Natalie Holt. She was great. I did think it was really cool to see the backstory of each person. So like B12 is a doctor, which kind of mirrors her empathetic nature in the TVA, and Mobius actually having the jet ski slight memories and being the same kind of person, but on Earth selling jet skis. Fun little Easter egg here. I love that they did this with DB Cooper in the first season, but the shout out to Frank, which is like a famous story in 1962 that 3 people escaped Alcatraz and they never found him. They don't know if they drowned. But that guy's name was Frank, which is kind of funny. Right. So Casey's Frank, and that's where he went, which is kind of a fun like mashup of MCU versus real world culture. And then I really need to give a shout out to Benson and Moorhead and their actual editing ability. We've talked about that with the Moon Knight episode 4. We talked about that with Loki episode 4 and how long the cut to black was, blah, blah. But I just loved how they handled Loki figuring out that he can control this time skipping thing, which to me was a awesome kind of cherry on top. Like, again, we just talked about Loki as a new character in his new home of the TVA and that role. I love giving that role some superpowers, if you will, as well, which is like maybe he can become this multiversal time hopping person just through his own ability without a portal, which is really cool to me. But him actually figuring out how to do it, and then how he first just jumps back like a few seconds, then he jumps back like 5 minutes, and then he goes, oh my gosh, I think I know what I'm doing here. And the actual quick jump all the way back to the TVA and the loom, and then the cut. And it gave me, and he said, I can rewrite my story. The music hits this cool note. I have chills right now. And then boom, he cuts, and it cuts right away to the bum, wham, bum, bum, bum. And like, just, there's something, that's what I mean about the direction, like something about the pacing of those cuts, the actual performance that's coming through, and then the dialogue of, I can rewrite my own story, cue Natalie Holt's incredible music. Like the last 2 minutes is like, this is peak television, man. And I just love it so much. I love it so much.
Dude, Yeah, no, I'm with you. There were so many things that were done well. I love how grounded this series somehow feels, despite like whenever I say grounded, I mean like visually, because I think of the built out sets. Like I feel like often I think of these shows as just being like looking a little insubstantial.
Yeah.
Like, and
how about OB having the same room on Earth as he kind of does?
Like all these, there's just an intentionality that pervades all of it. Like these little character moments with each of them, like what you're like, we could spend time talking about every member of this kind of group that he's trying to assemble, but just all of it to me is like the peak post Endgame MCU kind of stuff that we get really revved up about. So there are so many questions that I still have that I'm really, really hoping at least get kind of
I hope it doesn't fall flat in its face. I hope it doesn't.
I mean, it's hard for me to,
because they knew the entire show from the get-go, I don't think it's going to fall on its face. Like they've known the ending. They haven't reshot anything. So why would they intentionally choose the ending to be lame? I don't think they will.
I think it's just, I guess my final note here before we go to Natalie, I don't know if people have been following, like the last couple of weeks, there have been a lot of interesting stories coming out about like conversations within Marvel and people's reactions to Marvel. And honestly, a lot of it is feeling just kind of like rehashed at this point. Like, I'm
so tired of that conversation. I'm not
reading a lot of like super compelling or surprising takes.
No.
But I do find it really interesting that these conversations are happening while one of the best things that Marvel has done is coming out week to week. Like it's just
so
it's
funny.
A strange
Variety,
it's one thing, like there are shows that
will write an article about the Marvel Cinematic Universe is screwed. Meanwhile, I'm watching peak Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like what are we talking about here? I'm watching something incredibly entertaining and should be up for awards like the other shows in its genre. So whatever.
I think
I've just basically decided like I'm just not going to worry about that stuff. Like I was live streaming Spider-Man and a couple people were asking me, "Did you read the article?" I'm like, I saw the headline. I just don't even know that I really care anymore. Like I don't care about the peripherals of what is going to happen to my favorite thing. I'm just going to care about my favorite thing. And then if my favorite thing starts dipping or becoming not my favorite thing, then I'll change my tune. But I don't need to hear about everyone else's opinion about my favorite thing. I just don't anymore.
I think no, that's exactly how I'm feeling these days. Is it's like the Marvel Cinematic Universe is not like a team that I root for. Like it's not like I'm like, okay, here's a new show. Like who's gonna win, Marvel or the critics? Like I am going to watch it and hope that I like it because that's why we're doing this in the first place anyway. Like it's not like anybody was like offer us the job of being Marvel podcast hosts. If we were willing to be into it. Like, it's like, this is just something that we naturally like. And I will say, like, whatever the rumblings are about what is and isn't going to work moving forward, like, if they want to keep cranking out stuff like this, I'm going to keep liking it. So I'm a happy camper.
All I know is Annika and I sat down on her couch last night and had just an incredible hour of doing nothing else but being captivated by what's happening on my TV screen. So I'm in still.
I told you this last night. I got interrupted halfway through last night's episode,
which sucks,
for a work thing that took me like an hour and a half. Normally that would be the kind of thing where I'd come in being like, I'm worried that maybe my viewing was compromised, but I just didn't really click with it the way I normally do. And like, even still, I'm like riding my high. So
I watched it twice. I watched it with Annika, and then when I was working on my screen recap for the Marvels, I just put it on in the background again, just because who knows.
Nice.
Okay, so Natalie Holt, you know her. She is the composer of Loki Season 1, Loki Season 2. She did the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. Incredible work dating all the way back to Season 1. And we talked to her 2 years ago, and she was such a delight. And I think that she has some really amazing tendencies. It's so funny to me that she's so like this sweet, innocent, reserved person. And then she's creating the like most badass themes in the
I know,
MCU.
I know.
So we're talking to her. She's like, "Oh, I hope you like it." And then it's like, "Womp womp womp womp," and I'm like, "What?" Like Shaq is coming out to this, as I'll say in a second.
Right.
So you're going to want to hear from her. It's a fascinating conversation. And before I do that, I just want to sign off and say thank you so much for listening. Robbie and I are so grateful for your support. We can really use your support. You can support us in so many different ways, and we'll talk about that in a different episode. But as Robbie mentioned, you can check out Friends from Work Plus. You can buy some merchandise. You can donate to the podcast. You can share it, rate, review, subscribe. There's all ways that you can get connected and support what we're doing over here so that we can keep churning out some really fun content. Thank you for listening. Enjoy Natalie Holt. We'll see you next week. Natalie Holt, welcome back to Friends from Work, a longtime friend. Let's go.
Yeah. Oh, nice to be back.
2 years ago, we were sitting here talking about your masterful work on season 1. And I have so many questions about the evolution of season 2. What is it like working on a season 2 of a project? Specifically, how do you take on the challenge of what themes are going to stay exactly the same? What themes do you want to evolve, and in what ways? And what is completely new and fresh to you? Is that fun? Is that a challenge? Kind of take me through the whole season 2 process.
Oh, I had so much fun on this show. It just really, it's the first time I've ever done a season 2 of something. So that was a first for me. So coming back to something that had been so much fun to score in the first place, and then getting to do it again and just make it bigger and bolder was great. And I kind of had a big music editor team. There were 5 of them. So I'd kind of, by the time we got to watch the first cut of an episode, there would be a lot of music in there that was already from season 1. And we'd kind of have a spotting session with the editor and the producer, sometimes the directors. And they'd just say, "We love this cue can just stay. We love this one." And it was kind of clear, like if something was just working, then we'd use it, and they were like, "But we would like to just change the end, la la la." So I'd kind of go back to the stems from season 1 with some of those cues, and then add some things in or rework them. And then we'd watch something where it was like, well, this cue works, but it needs to do something else. And then I'd rewrite some, and it just kind of made sense of what should stay and what should change. And then this is like episode 3 was just a new territory, new time period, new character, like the honky tonk piano, and the sort of more, I don't know, 1890s style score, which was a bit of a departure. So it was fun to sort of have those moments as well.
It had to be kind of fun to just, because the show has a time travel nature to it, to do the whole ragtime thing. I saw you posted that video of the piano player playing the ragtime version of that theme. How fun is that? Wow. Yeah,
it was so fun. And it just came along at the end because we'd sort of scored the Victor Timely as a, like a pub or whatever, the guy in the back of the pub playing along with it when he was sort of introducing his machine. And so, having had that honky tonk thing all the way through, it just came right at the end. It's like, oh, should we try a honky tonk version of the Marvel theme? Yeah, let's try it. And then it stayed. It was an experiment.
On that exact same note, I think episode 2 was the episode that had like the like disco 70s theme, right? Wasn't it?
Well, disco theremin as well. Like that was a new genre invented right there.
There you go. Well, first off, I had to say, last time we had you on, you were talking about how John Williams is, unsurprisingly, a hero of yours, and how you were sad because you were supposed to go see him live, and then I think he had to cancel. So I have to say, since that time, you have now composed a series with John Williams. So I think you have successfully, kind of surpassed whatever your initial John Williams expectations would have been. Just from attending a concert.
Oh my God, that's so mad. Yeah, you're right. And crazy. I now have like, "Dear Natalie, lots of love, John," like a signed manuscript from Obi-Wan Kenobi on my wall in my studio. So
it's pretty cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Life goals. Tip.
Oh yeah, what a dream. You were talking about some of these different themes, though, and the way that you get to explore them differently in different time periods. the Loki score, the tracks are not sequenced chronologically. It seems like they're sequenced either more thematically or just kind of for a better flow. And I was curious if that's something that you get to have a hand in when you're building it out, and if that's something that you kind of make an intention of doing with all your scores. And just because I know some Marvel projects, for instance, are very much like you press play on the score and it's just kind of the music straight through in the order that you hear it in the film or the series.
Yeah, no. So I didn't have any say in the Obi album. That was just Disney put that together, but I was totally in charge of this album. Like I remixed the tracks. I kind of cut some tracks together to make musical sense, because sometimes you hear a cue and it works to picture, but then just hearing it on its own, it's like, oh, it's got 10 seconds of motoring along where something's happening. And so I spent weeks remixing the album with the engineer, and then mastering the album. And then like I wanted an order that just felt like a sort of journey within itself. I wanted to sort of have some ups and downs and shape to it. So I definitely those 4 Loki albums that I've done are all very crafted by me. And I love that you've got one behind you.
Oh, I do. Yes. Which I think
Robbie.
I saw you also spoke into the creative decisions in terms of how the actual vinyl like presentation came out, right? And your work with Mondo there.
Yeah, that Mondo was so lovely to work with. I really enjoyed putting that together. It was really fun, and I love the artwork on it. Yeah, really.
Oh, it came out so well,
really
and it sounds really good.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that about kind of getting to go in and work on these albums, because they do feel distinct in that way. Like that's one of the reasons I seized on it, is it feels like kind of one more act of creation that we get from you there, where it's like it's not just that we're ripping the audio that we're getting from the show, but you're actually kind of giving us new little reveals whenever you go in and listen to it. So it's a real treat for folks that, which I know we have a lot of in our listener base, folks that just like to go in and listen to these scores.
And it was fun. Like I delivered the album, the first volume from season 2, and then I just had this idea. I was like, can I put some of Tom's voice in? Because like I wanted him. There were a few, and then so there's one track in there. I had like 5 actually that I tried to get, but they were like they wouldn't approve it. They only approved that one moment, but it was fun to have him say something before the Bavarian track kicks off.
We had a listener point that out, because they asked, is this the first time in the history of Marvel scores where you have spoken dialogue in a track like that? And to my knowledge, it is.
Natalie, we're obviously, as fans, coming off a crazy twist. If you're just listening to this now, episode 4 just premiered last week. And one of the things specifically I wanted to talk to you about was that last credit track. There is such a crazy edit at the end of the show where the whole thing goes black for maybe 6 seconds, like longer than it should. And then you're waiting for what's going to happen, and the credits start rolling, and you have this beautiful track that's really eerie. It's kind of haunting, it's somber, and it's mixed super quiet actually on Disney Plus, all of which I very much enjoyed. So can you just talk to me a little bit about that specific track?
Oh my God, I had such a nightmare. I just had a different track there, and then Kevin Wright was like, I'm not sure this works. And I was just about to go into a session, and I did this super quick, like, just came up with it like the night before the session and recorded it. And then I was like, what about this? And Kevin was like, love it. And it just kind of got put in really last minute. And then I was mixing the album and I completely forgot about it. And then everyone, like, it kind of went on Twitter and people were commenting on that track. And I was like, I better put that on the album. It wasn't on the album. And today I've just been like, we need to put this track on the album. So I'm just adding that on. I hope people are happy that will be on there.
That's crazy.
I think they will be.
Well, it is so appropriate for the moment. I think, it's partially fans just also like you do such a good job of encapsulating that moment, even if it was a last minute thing. And the music feels how we're all feeling as fans when we're watching it. So good job.
It was more like I think it was the Mobius theme, or it was like a more kind of normal ending that you felt okay again because the music came back in. And then Kevin was like, I think we need to hold this feeling. Like, how can we musically do that? But I love it when you kind of just come up with something quickly that really works. It's so satisfying.
That's amazing.
It's so talking about that moment, and maybe you answered this. We had someone write in and compare that to the famous finale of 2001: A Space Odyssey, and Dave kind of falling through time and space, and how the music there sort of reflects the pandemonium and the like a little bit of a tragic confusion. And so that definitely came across. Was that something that you had in mind as a reference? Is that just you happen to channel what's considered to be one of the greatest films of all time because you're a genius, or sort of how did that come out?
I really love that sort of serial atonal music, like Ligeti, The Shining, all those kind of pieces of music are just so powerful. And as a string player as well, I just kind of love using those weird effects. And so I had a choir, a 40-piece choir, and 8 strings play that piece, and this amazing cellist sort of doing these quite sort of soloistic thing that just worked really well with this layer of voices. So yeah, it was fun to channel that.
The last question for me, Natalie, you have done a good job, as I mentioned earlier, of posting little clips of like that ragtime piano. You posted a soloist earlier on social media. It might have been a cello or a violin solo or something like that.
Nickel Harper, I think that was Eric.
Yeah. And
so
you
many
have the
views.
Yeah, it kind of blew up. That's what I was going to say. And you had the theremin thing, which is so cool for people to see. For anyone who doesn't know what a theremin is, it's just a wild instrument to watch because the right hand looks like they're not playing anything. It's wild. But my last question is, I do love how you're involving all these different unique solos and instruments. We talked about the disco theme. Are there any surprises musically for listeners to be tuned into? Any fun new instruments coming up still in these last 2 episodes?
Episode 5, I just think you're gonna your mind is gonna be blown by episode 5.
Oh, you love to hear it?
It's my favorite. Yeah. 5 and 6 for me are like, I don't know. Yeah. And there's some musical moments that you'll enjoy. And yeah.
Okay.
That's fun. Well, and that kind of lines
6.
up with
blink twice if Disney's right behind you.
I think I saw that Eric Martin in an interview that released this week, kind of following the episode 4 airing, he said that 5 and 6 were his favorites, and then he thinks people are going to kind of be blown away. So it would make sense, I suppose, that the music would reflect that. Well,
all I can say is I get I get a bit of a musical moment where it's just me.
Oh,
what's going on.
Let's go.
It feels like a really big moment for kind of having the culmination of 2.5 years work and all the things I've been planting all the way through season 2. So I'm excited. And you know what? Like, yeah, if you want to chat again after you've seen 6, then give me a shout.
We want to chat every month. If you want to chat every month from now.
No, that's so fun to hear because I think we talked about this a bit last time we spoke, but now that we've had the full season 1, and then now that we're almost through season 2, your contribution to the music of the MCU, but also just to film and TV music over the last few years is really pretty monumental. As people that we really nerd out and get into film and TV scores and talk about that a lot on the podcast. And your work is really special in that it sort of it tends to transcend the people that just nerd out about scores. Like we talked about how you see clips of like marching bands playing the Loki theme, the green theme, and like it's a score that
Shaq DJing to the green theme.
right? It's something that
I'll send
it's
it.
Oh yeah.
it's permeated. So it's really, I think it's really fitting to of all the shows to kind of get to showcase the work the composer has done. I think this is the perfect one. So I would love to talk after these episodes.
Yeah, give me a shout. I just think hopefully you'll enjoy 5 and 6, and I really went to town on episode 6. So yeah, be great to see what you thought of it.
Natalie, you're the best. We are so thankful for your time, and we are such big fans if you haven't gathered that already. So can't wait to see what you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Great to see you again.
Thanks, Natalie.
Bye.